Let's take, great, thank you. Let's take a look at the agenda for this evening. I'm just going to share my screen. So, first of all, we're going to hear about the Insure Our Future campaign, which targets insurance companies, many of them in London itself. Then we'll have time to ask questions, and then we'll give you a little break before we move on to talk about the Stop EACOP campaign that Giles has already mentioned, which is a pipeline that's being built in East Africa, with Total being the main fossil fuel culprit involved in that. We'll have time to ask questions about that campaign, and then we'll take some space for us to discuss with each other about what we've heard tonight, and to talk about how we might want to take action together before we close up for the evening at 7:30. Great, so let's make a start. We're really pleased to be joined by Anna Lewis tonight. Anna works for Quakers in Britain on campaigning and advocacy for climate and economic justice. So she's going to tell us about the Insure Our Future campaign that I just mentioned, which targets Lloyd's of London, amongst others. So over to you, Anna. Thanks.
Great. Hi, thank you, Roche, for such a lovely introduction. And also thank you, Giles, for that reading, because I really liked the theme of friendship that was in it, which is so relevant to our Quaker communities, where we use friend to refer to each other in recognition of our equality and that of God in all of us. So yeah, I'm going to talk about the insurance campaign that we've been doing at Quakers in Britain. I'm going to talk about what we've done, a bit of background on the insurance industry and why it's helpful to target. And yeah, hopefully point towards some ways that if you're inspired at all that you can get involved. But I'm going to start with that awkward pause where I try and share my screen without anything going horribly wrong. There we go. Hopefully everyone can see a protest banner that says ensuring fossil fuels equals ensuring climate breakdown. Great. So our campaign has focused not just on the insurance industry, but on an organisation called Lloyd's of London, which their headquarters is pictured in this. And I'm going to talk a bit about their role in the industry. And we've also focused on EACOP, the East African crude oil pipeline, but I'm not going to go into so much detail about that because I believe that Meryne's going to cover it amazingly right after me. So instead, I'm just going to start by giving a bit of background on the whole campaign and what we've done. And some of the structure of the insurance industry is quite specialist. It can be quite opaque from the outside, and we're still learning. So if anyone has any connections into the industry or expertise in it, I'm always really keen to hear particularly from you. And we'll have some time for questions and discussion at the end as well, if this raises anything for you. So first off, why target the insurance industry? I've started with a quote that I think we've probably all heard, if not those exact words, then that message quite clearly already. It's from the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres in response to the 2022 IPCC report, which essentially said that we need to stop all new fossil fuel projects and shift to renewables if we're going to see a safe and livable future for all. Insurance is part of the structure that enables new fossil fuel projects to be built, so it can also be a part of that shift to renewables and part of the structure that makes it harder to build new fossil fuel projects. And here in London, or in the UK more generally, we're particularly able to target the industry because London is the global centre of the industry. About 50% of the energy industry gets its insurance from companies based in London. And we also know that our finance sector has a huge climate impact. The wider UK finance sector is responsible for more emissions in total than the UK is as a country. And there's already been some amazing campaigns by faith groups and communities on the finance industry, but insurance is something that's been relatively untouched so far. And this is a campaign that's already been started by a coalition separate to us called Insure Our Future. And their main ask is that they're asking the insurance industry to stop insuring new oil and gas. Without insurance, those projects can't go ahead. The campaign's already been supported by organisations like Coal Action Network, Client Earth and Extinction Rebellion, using lots of different tactics, but working together to address different aspects of the industry. And they've already had some really significant successes, but they need more people and more groups coming on board to keep helping to make the point. The ask isn't just, sorry, I think I've set my slides on automatic timing, so I might have to flick back and forth a bit. The ask isn't just for the insurance industry to stop insuring new coal, oil and gas, it's also to plan a phase out of existing insurance for those projects. And there's also some other asks on divesting assets from fossil fuels and on bringing other aspects of their business in line with both the 1.5 degree limit and with human rights principles. And this is just a demonstration of some of the progress that they've had so far in the campaign. So in just 5 years since the campaign is launched, they've really built momentum, and the number of insurers adopting policies is increasing every year. And so far, there have been 41 insurers that have adopted policies on coal phase out, and only 12 on oil and gas. But as you can see in this image, it's been increasing each year, the number that are adopting these policies. And some of them are really big in the industry. So ones like Swiss Re, Allianz and Munich Re have all adopted significant exclusions on coal, oil and gas in the last few years. And that reduced cover is already having an impact. For coal, it means that companies planning new projects face soaring premiums for cover. There's reduced offering of cover for their projects, which means longer searches for insurance, and all of that adds up to much more expense on these projects, making them much harder to do. And outside of China, where there's a few limited exceptions, it's now really hard to build new coal power plants, largely because of this bottleneck that's been targeted by the campaign. And the hope is that it will continue to snowball. So every new win creates pressure on other companies and allows us to keep pushing the laggards along. And this campaign isn't just operating in isolation, it's linked up with campaigns that are existing on specific projects. I mentioned EACOP, but they've also linked up with the campaign on the Trans Mountain pipeline and also on the Adani coal mine, which recently had a really big win. So that's kind of an overview of the campaign in general, but what we've been working on, as I mentioned, is Lloyd's of London. And they are the biggest insurance marketplace in the world. They are based in London, hence the name. And they currently have no policy on oil and gas and only a really weak policy on coal. And they've not ruled out any of the damaging projects that are being targeted by the campaign, like EACOP or the Trans Mountain pipeline. So they're really within an industry that is showing some positive movement. They're lagging pretty far behind. This is a picture of their old-timey insurance floor, which is the building that they've been operating in for hundreds of years. And they operate globally, both in insurance and reinsurance, which is when insurers take out insurance on what they've insured to cover their risk as well. They're the largest insurance market in the world and a top 6 global reinsurer. And they cover about half of the London premium. And particularly a portion of the market that they cover is energy insurance. So underwriters and insurers within Lloyd's cover a really significant proportion of total global energy insurance, which again makes it for campaigners a really exciting bottleneck to try to change things and start that shift to renewables. I should say it has no relation to Lloyd's Bank, which many in the UK might recognise as a brand. They're completely separate. And also it's not, we refer to it as a company sometimes, but actually if you want to really understand it, think of it as a marketplace. It's a site where trade takes place between insurers operating within that marketplace. It's built up of a society of members who are the people who actually provide the capital and underwrite the insurance, and they group together into syndicates to minimize their risk. And all of this is a little bit dry and complicated, but the main point is that the syndicates, because of that, the autonomy that they have in the market and the way that they group together people offering insurance, the syndicates become a really important place to target when we're trying to change practices. I've given a bit of a glossary here, not to worry about too much, but just to help as I talk through a bit more of the structure. So as I said, if you imagine it as a marketplace, you can think of it as a literal market, and the stalls within it are the syndicates. And at each stall, you can imagine a stall holder, someone who's actually doing the selling, and that will be a managing agent, which is a company that operates on behalf of the syndicate to run the sale of insurance. Lloyd's also has an overarching council and corporation which set rules governing the whole market. But as I said, they don't really have any policies on oil and gas. Their policy on coal is really weak. And in response to the campaigning that has happened so far, the council and the corporation have really not been very responsive. So what we're seeing more and more is that the really fruitful path to go down, if we want to see policies changing right now, is to target the syndicates. Although it would be lovely if eventually we could get a blanket ban from Lloyd's overall, because that would have a really significant impact on the whole industry. And I mentioned that we're focusing on EACOP as well. I'm going to talk in really light detail about it because I know that it's going to get covered more, but just to give some quick context on why we wanted to focus on it. For those who haven't heard of it, it's a proposed pipeline in East Africa to transport oil from a new drilling site in Uganda through Tanzania into the sea, where most of it would be just exported. The pipeline is bad for a million reasons. It would displace a lot of people from their homes. It would go through several really important natural sites and ecosystems. It would threaten freshwater sources that are used by both people and animals. And of course, the export of the oil and the subsequent burning of it as a fossil fuel would have really horrific climate effects, which again, we know are concentrated on the most vulnerable, many of whom will live in the region that the pipeline is being built. And that's kind of the core of our climate justice analysis, and the way that we work on climate as Quakers is that although we talk about climate change as a global thing, some of the worst effects will be, and in fact already are being felt in Africa and throughout the world where vulnerable populations live. And because as Quakers, one of the really central tenets of our faith is a belief in the equality of all people, we can't accept that inequitable distribution of the pain, while some people still benefit and profit from that being the way that things work. The bright side is that the project's not confirmed yet, and it's still looking for insurance. It hasn't confirmed insurance yet. And so for us, it's a real chance for those of us who are based in London and the UK who can have influence over a company like that to stand in solidarity with those in East Africa, including Quakers, friends who are based there, by targeting these companies that operate near us. So this is the first thing that we did as an organisation to work on insurance and on the pipeline. We sent a letter to both the chairman and the CEO of Lloyd's of London, from our recording clerk, Paul, who's kind of the representative of British Quakers, and from Benito Wamalwa, who is Africa section clerk for Friends World Committee of Consultation. Not important to remember his title, just that he's kind of similarly representative over Quakers in Africa. And in the letter, we asked to meet and to discuss Lloyd's policy on fossil fuels, and specifically on the East African crude oil pipeline. And if you want to hear more about that, there's the full detail is on our website. And a few months after that, we hadn't heard anything back, so we decided to take the campaign a little bit bigger. We pulled together an interfaith letter with 23 UK faith leaders, including many groups and representatives that were part of Faith for the Climate, signing another open letter to Lloyd's, again reiterating the ask for them to reconsider their fossil fuel policies. And this was the first time that the wider UK faith community had commented specifically on insurance. And it was also, as you can see in this slide, it got into the Times, and this was the first time that the insurance campaign had been covered by such a significant UK press outlet. So it was really exciting, from both angles. And we're now looking at some follow-up, such as more engagement with the top syndicates in the market and doing something in person at Lloyd's offices. But this is something I want to emphasize, is that as faith groups, we can sometimes do quite surprising things and have quite surprising effects on a campaign, because maybe it's not surprising to us, but for those who are being targeted and for the media, it can sometimes feel a bit unusual that we're commenting on this kind of thing, or that we have opinions on it. And that can really help us to make the message heard when other groups are struggling to be heard. The final thing that I wanted to talk about was grassroots advocacy, because although engagement as an organisation is really helpful, it's also amazing how much just individuals who are brave enough to get involved can do. And I've just put some pictures in here from the recent Extinction Rebellion march in London, so you can see that hundreds of Quakers turned up. There's a really strong climate justice movement. within Quakers, and also a really strong peace presence in the climate movement. And people have done a lot of different things. They've written letters to some of the syndicates within the Lloyd's market. A couple of really brave Quakers attended the AGMs of syndicates to ask them about their fossil fuel policies. And one of those friends attending actually resulted in a meeting with Beazley that is coming up in September. And Beazley is one of the biggest syndicates in the Lloyd's market. It's shown some recent movement on its policies, but it could still do a lot better. So it's really exciting that we've managed to get this meeting. It's not something, again, it's kind of new for the campaign to be getting that kind of access. And the only group that's managed to get a meeting with the overall Lloyd's kind of governance structure is a group called Mothers Rise Up. And I wanted to take a moment to talk about them and look at some of the activity that they've done, because they use a lot of creativity, a lot of humor, and they use the fact that they are mothers who are worried about their children to make their campaign a little bit more human and build a bit more of a relationship with the people that they're targeting. And I think all of that can be really inspirational for us and what we're doing. And I think I might need to exit and reshare just so that you can hear the sound on this. So I'll just do that quickly. There we go. I'm going to press play. Please shout if you can't hear it. That clip always makes me smile when I watch it, and I've watched it a lot of times at this point. So yeah, the thing I wanted to get across by sharing that was just that creativity and fun can be a really good part of doing campaigning. It doesn't have to be protests with placards, even though those are amazing and a really necessary part of our movement. You can be relational and thoughtful and friendly in your approach and have a really successful result. So the final thing I'm going to finish with is some thoughts on how to get involved. And the big thing that the campaign really needs at the moment, I mentioned that there's a focus on EACOP that we're doing. And EACOP is a bit of a focus for the wider campaign because they've still not found insurance, but they are definitely looking. And I mentioned that the Lloyd's market contains several syndicates within it. If we can get each of those syndicates to say that they won't insure EACOP, then it will become uninsurable. And there's already been a lot of progress on that already, a lot of syndicates who have ruled out EACOP, but there's a long list left who haven't even yet been contacted because there's so many of them, and who could really do with a little bit of pressure just to see how they respond. So there's a guide that I'm going to share the link to that's been produced by Call Action Network, and it's a really helpful resource for anyone who wants to get involved. And the idea is that you adopt an insurer. So you pick one syndicate out of the list that you feel able to target and get in touch with them to see how they respond. And the guide contains some more information about EACOP, about insurance, and about how you can get started. And it also offers a lot of support and training, advice on building a group if you want to get people together to join you, how to escalate. So you start off with something gentle, but you build your campaign if they don't respond. And a lot of tech and kind of tools that can help as well. And just as a very simple pictorial example of what progression of a campaign like that might look like, I've got here, you could start off with kind of a quite friendly email to an insurer, you could then build it, if they don't respond, by getting more and more people to send an email. If they're still not responding or they're not being helpful, you could ring them up to try and have a conversation over the phone, which can often be it can keep it friendly while still getting a lot more information and putting a bit more pressure on them. And then you could do a physical presence outside of their office to make it really clear to everyone in the building that people are paying attention to their policies on EACOP. And as I said, we've found that faith voices can be really powerful on this campaign. So if you're forming a group with other people of faith, it can be helpful to think about how you'll communicate that to them. For example, instead of a traditional protest, you could do prayers or a vigil. When you write your emails, you could talk about why you're personally motivated to do activism around the climate and why you feel that it's so urgent that they act. There's a lot of ways to get your message across. And I just wanted to finish with the example of something recently that's really worked. And this was around the Adani coal mine in Australia. Many insurers had already ruled it out, but there was one tiny syndicate called Probitas, which, even though it was quite small, was known to be insuring some of the rail and haulage to the mine. So people did actions where they got together, sent emails, did phone calls, tried to put pressure on Probitas to change. And very recently, Probitas has pulled out of the mine. And in their pulling out from it, they didn't just say that they were pulling out from the transport, they said that they were no longer insuring the mine at all, which was news to us that they were insuring the mine. A lot of this is very, it's not transparent and it's hard to have this information. So without realizing it, the campaigners that had been working on this had dealt a really big blow to the ability of the project to go forwards. And that's just one example of how even a small group getting together and targeting just one syndicate can have a really big impact. So that's everything I've got to share in terms of kind of slides and me talking at everyone. But I hope we've got some time for kind of questions and discussion now, and I'm really excited to hear everyone's response.
Great, thank you so much, Anna. That was so informative and really helpful. I mean, speaking personally, I knew so little about insurance. It seemed very opaque and very shady, and I feel like I've got a much better grasp of what it means and what it's responsible for. And thank you for those concrete actions that people can take. I think that's always really helpful. Just to reiterate the three things of the emailing, writing a letter, doing a vigil or protest to one of these syndicates at Lloyd's. Does anyone have any questions for Anna about the campaign, about fossil fuel insurance, about the role of Lloyd's in London? We've got a bit of time before we have a break, so if anyone would like to ask a question, you're most welcome to.
Maybe I should try and do.
Oh, sorry, was someone speaking there? Hi, Tina. Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, Anna. I was just really interested to know whether any Quaker meetings have taken this on as a meeting, you know, for people who don't feel that they want to join XR or just Stop Oil. This is such a, in some ways, gentle way of joining the movement, and yet such an effective one.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of thinking about it. And I want to say I've just noticed Phil is here, who did go to two of the insurance AGMs. So hello and well done for what you did. Yeah, we've not shared this toolkit specifically with meetings yet because it has taken a while for Coal Action Network to get it ready. But my hope is that we can share it. And also I've put my email in the chat. I'm hoping that people can get in touch with that for more support on how exactly to kind of work through the toolkit and start taking action, because yeah, as I said, XR and Just Stop Oil, their work is really amazing and important to create that pressure, but it's not easy for everyone to do that kind of work. And what we want to do is provide if you just want to send an email or have a phone call and build a relationship with someone, that can also be really helpful.
It reminds me of what Cilla Elworthy did with the Oxford Research Group way back in the 70s and 80s, I suppose. I don't know if you know that work, but it had a similar sort of raison d'etre to it, that she was targeting people with influence, but that was with a peace direction rather than climate. But it might be interesting to look at some of her work if you have probably don't have any spare time to do that.
Thanks
It
so much.
sounds interesting though, I'll look it up.
Yeah, thank you, Tina. And just in case people missed it, if you go into the chat, a few links back is the link to the toolkit where you can learn more about how to contact these syndicates directly, adopt a syndicate. And I'll be sending all of this to you afterwards, so don't worry if you miss any links. We've probably got time for one more question. Phil, yes, would you like to go?
Well, not so much a question really, I suppose, but I just want to say I've been to a couple of the AGMs to ask a question from Fair Shares, and with Jo, who's I know is also in the meeting. We supported each other doing it. It's not without its stresses, but all I can say is if anyone here can do it, please do it. It's one of the best things you can do. It's one of them. It's speaking, as we would say in Quakers, truth to power, and it really is a very good way. And if you can get talking to them, we managed to set up a meeting with the chief executive of Beazley Insurance to talk about what they're doing. It can be a really satisfying thing to do, and any time you can put on it, please do it. It's amazing. And I can't recommend doing it highly enough. Sorry, that wasn't a question, was it? I do apologise.
No,
it was
good.
a glowing endorsement though, so I'll take it. Thank you. And yeah, I didn't see Jo in the chat as well, but hello. And yeah, AGM season for this year is mostly over, so we don't have any more opportunities to do it until next year. But a thing that you can do that's really similar is doing that kind of phone call and having a conversation. It is still scary, but it's a different kind of scary, and especially if you have that desire to speak truth to power and to be able to talk to the people who are making these decisions and just calmly ask them why they're doing it and if they'd consider changing, it can be really impactful.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Phil, for that encouragement. I think power holders often don't expect to be questioned in places where they feel comfortable and safe, so it's good to interrupt that somewhat. We're going to take a little break now. We should be able to have 5 minutes. So if you want to come back in 5 minutes time, 20 to 7, 6:40, and we'll continue and we'll learn a bit more about EACOP. So hopefully see you all in 5 minutes time. Thanks. Thanks. Okay, well, welcome back everyone. So now we're going to learn about EACOP, which Anna's mentioned, and I'm sure some of you already have some knowledge on. We're really lucky to be joined by Meryne Warah. Meryne is Global Director of Organising with our good friends at Greenfaith, and she's going to be talking about the EACOP pipeline. It's a project in East Africa that will devastate local communities, and it's currently being supported by UK institutions. Meryne, if I can pass over to you, if you are ready.
Sure, Rosh. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm sorry, everybody. I have a little bit of an interesting voice today because I'm not feeling well. So if I break out into a crazy cough, I know my colleague Abby, who is here, will gladly take over and help me out. So I'm glad to be here today, and I want to say thank you so much to Rosh for inviting me to partner in this process. I'm equally going to share my screen, which I'm very bad at. So if I show you interesting stuff, look at me with grace as we continue. All right, I hope that is that visible, Rosh? Can you see everything?
Yep, that's good.
Perfect. Okay. So let's see, let me start from the beginning, sorry. Just like the speaker before me, I have quite a number of slides. And all right, so I don't want to go too much into, and I don't know why it is blank. I don't want to go too much into, okay, my screen, okay, good. too much into the project details because Anna had already alluded to a point of it, but I'm just going to go through quickly. So 1.7 billion barrels of recoverable crude oil, I might add, was discovered in the Albertine Graben in Western Uganda. So international companies plan to drill for oil in the region at 2 oil fields. So every time we're talking about EACOP, we forget that there are 2 very major oil fields that are making EACOP possible. And the first one is Tilenga oil field. And this is the one that is owned by Total Energies in France. And the second one is called Kingfisher oil field. And this is the one that is owned by Chinese National Oil Offshore Oil Corporation, abbreviated as CNOOC. So a portion of oil will be refined domestically at a proposed refinery in Kabale. Kabale is one of the communities where EACOP is passing from. And then majority of oil will be exported via the East African Crude Oil Pipeline, famously known as EACOP, into the international waters. So I would like to also mention that I didn't want to put a lot of text in one slide because then my director for education would kick me for doing that. So I would like to mention that when they say portion, they mean 23 or 20% of the oil is the one that is owned locally by Uganda owning maybe 20 or 23%, and Tanzania owning, actually no, Uganda owning 15% and Tanzania owning 15%, making a total of 30% for those 2 countries, while Total owns 70% and CNOOC owns also 65% in that order because of the way the maths are done. And so if built, EACOP would be the longest heated pipeline in the world, running at 1,444 kilometers from Western Uganda to the port of Tanga in Tanzania. So we look at why Greenfaith is invested in saying we have to stop EACOP. Number one, there are environmental, social, and human rights risks in this, and not forgetting economic, because everything that happens means people's livelihood or economic livelihood will be affected at one way or the other. So we have one of the biggest national parks is called Murchison National Park, that is in Uganda, that holds one of the biggest and rare species, of course, making sure that the tourism sector in Uganda is maintained by the fact that the park is left the way it is. So if EACOP passes through this park, it means the elephants are going to be displaced. It means the monkeys are going to be displaced. It means that the cheetahs, the gorillas, the special birds are going to be displaced. At the same time, because it's going to pass through Lake Albert, I would like to also note that in the 20 communities, actually there are 22 communities in Uganda. Most of them, majority of those 22 communities are fisher folks. They rely entirely on fishing. The African culture is interesting because where we get water is also where our animals go to drink water, and again is where we go and bathe and wash our clothes. We use the same sources of water interchangeably because culturally we know when to go and bathe, when to go and fetch water for domestic use, when to go fishing, and when to stay clear because the animals are going to drink their water. So, excuse me. So that is also going to be affected because the law in Africa is that when a place has been earmarked for a project, then it means nobody can go there. Fishermen can no longer access the lake for fishing. Communities can no longer access the lake for getting clear water. And when I say Lake Albert, there's also a huge percent of the same pipeline passing through Lake Victoria. As Anne had already mentioned, that Lake Victoria is a shared freshwater, one of the largest freshwater lakes in Africa, and it is shared between 4 countries, not only the East African country, but 4 countries. So this means that also that is going to be affected. And with that, of course, comes human-wildlife conflict. So we see land acquisition and displacement rampant. When Anne was mentioning that people have been misplaced, I want to put a number to that. More than 1,000 households have been displaced as we speak. So as I mentioned, that livelihood is at risk. Farmers, fisherfolk, tourism industry is impacted. Impact of oil drilling within Murchison Falls and National Park. So we can just imagine what is going to happen where animals are used to roaming freely. And pipeline running through biodiversity hotspots, including Lake Victoria, as I had mentioned. Harassment and intimidation of human rights defenders, not to mention climate risks. So when I say harassment of human rights defenders, that is, you'd think that is a light thing. So one of the things I always tease my colleagues in US about, or in the North about, is that every time people say, for you to look at your campaign as a success, then probably 1 or 2 people should be arrested. That makes it a success. In Africa, or with this project, arrest of anybody makes me want to hide because it is super dangerous. Harassment here means you getting arrested, thrown in a jail cell, no bond, and even if you're given a cash bail, your families are so poor that they cannot afford the cash bail because the only source of collateral probably that they can use to get money to pay your cash bail, which is land, is already taken away. So here arrests are very dangerous, and we always try to think about how that should not happen. We only have a case, just indulge me, my computer is a bit slow. We recently have a case that got in today of people who were protesting against EACOP, and they were brutally arrested on the streets. The news we got is that these guys are still in prison or in the holding cells, and we do not know what's going to happen to them. And so they can decide to kill you there, or they can decide to put you somewhere and throw away the keys. So let me try and give you a little bit of a geography of the way the pipeline is. I don't know whether you can see this very well, but so this is how the pipeline, sorry, okay. Technology is not my friend. All right, so this is a little bit of a map of how everything moves. Total owning the biggest part, followed closely by CNOC, and then Ugandan government, and then Tanzanian government. So as you see the way those arrows are moving from one place to the other, so Ugandan government, then you have the Ugandan oil refinery company, and then we have Tanzanian Petroleum and Development Corporations. These are government state corporations which are put in place legally by the respective governments. And then we have the EACOP company down there. So as I mentioned, Uganda 15%, Tanzania 15%, Total has 62%, while CNOC would assume 100% because at the end of the day, when they sell everything, the profits, they will get 100%, the same as, you know, Total also getting 100%. But in this case, if you're looking at where the EACOP thing is, from CNOC to EACOP, it's only going to get a little bit of 80%, but at the end of the day, they're the winners. That's why they get 100%. And then we've got these banks here, which again, Anna was talking about. We've got Standard Chartered, which up until 3 months ago, claims that they have withdrawn. And that is why CNOC took over the financing to 100%, because Standard Bank was taking a huge amount of that for them. And then we have Stanbic Uganda, which is also going to, so Standard Chartered was going to channel their money through Stanbic Uganda, which was going to give the money, of course, for the pipelines installation. So other banks are Sumitomo and ICBC. These are Chinese. We also have Bank of America, which is still very quiet. They have not said whether they're withdrawing or continuing with the same. And if we see financial advisors and legal arrangers, those who make the brokers, the in-between gentlemen, they propose to come up with close to 3 billion loan, US dollars. And then the 100% ownership of Total means Total was going to, the EACOP company was going to give 2 billion equity financing. Equity means they're They're not financing it directly from their pockets, but they have people who have given them money to invest in the said project. Anyway, I don't want to bore you with a lot of mathematics, but I can send this to Rosh, and then Rosh can share with the rest of the team if they wanted to. So the strategic choice for these guys to make sure that EACOP comes into place is that for the oil project to be viable commercially, the companies must export the oil out of landlocked Uganda to international markets. Now, 15% means that they don't even, use the oil locally. And yet, these are countries who are only emitting close to 0.02%, because Africa in total is only emitting about 14%. So this is something, the pollution is happening in their countries, but they don't get to enjoy the energy that comes from this, because they say this is development, and I put it in air quotes because of issues that we're going to look at in a short while. And please, Roch, you'll remind me when time is up, because I can talk forever. So without the pipeline, the oil drilling at Tilenga and Kingfisher is not possible. And for this reason, we decided to focus our advocacy primarily on the pipeline itself. So, okay, perfect. All right, so this family is living like 3 steps away from, like if you're walking and taking 3 steps away from the proposed area. And as you can see, in Africa, we have this beautiful thing. I don't know whether it's beautiful or it's our own whatever doing, that where you have your home, you also have a small place where you do your own farming for consumption, for household consumption. So should the pipeline pass through here, because these people are not affected, it's not in the pipeline region, so they were not compensated. They will stay there, but the impact of the pipeline that runs 1,445 kilometers long, and the way if a spill happens and seeps through the soil, it will affect their product, the smoke and the pollution and the heat, because it will be their hottest burning will affect them, but they will have nowhere to go. As you can see, this is a typical traditional humble house of an African person. And these are her children. So she has not been compensated. She will not be moved. So she will be faced at the end of the day to decide to move herself. So what does this mean in terms of impacts? Don't worry, those are Maasais or Turkanas who are along the pipeline area. Okay. So my computer keeps doing this to me, all right. So the Maasais are known to be pastoralists. If you look at the Maasais in every community in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, they are pastoralists, which means they don't fence their lands. They don't put demarcators on their lands. They rarely till their land. They leave it as open as possible so that they can move as long a distance as they want, looking for pasture. So should this happen, then it means the Maasais cannot practice what they're used to practicing. The Maasais' wealth lies on their cattle. Now, the relocation system or process does not cater for their cattle, because they are told relocation compensation is only given to that person who has land where the pipeline will pass, but says nothing about your livestock. Most of them are in camps. In Uganda, they are in camps, and in Tanzania, they are in camps. In camps, you cannot go with your cattle because the pastoralist cattle are they have large herds, so that cannot happen. Anyway, so as we had already seen, the impacts are going to be livestock is going to be lost or sold at a throwaway price, or they will die as they wander around. Of course, household income is going to be interfered with, because 80% of African population is fed on agriculture, and the 30% of that agriculture is done by women. So the central processing facility of EACOP is based in a very high place, like a hill, let me say a hill for purposes of understanding. So when there's enough water in the central processing unit, which has been used in the machines, in the plants, in the testing of whatever, they release that water, and that water flows downstream. And then when it rains and then floods happen, this is what happens. This water is highly toxic, and this is somebody's family's house whose again, compensation was not given because the pipeline was not passing in their land. They were left to stay here. And yet, this is what is happening. This was reported to Total, and nothing happened. We gathered this information when Greenfaith had a training in Uganda with the faith leaders and our circle leaders, and they let us know that they had made a complaint about the water that is being released from the central processing unit into their home, causing man-made floods, and nothing happened. Children have to go to school. When it floods in Africa, it really, really floods. So when children pass these waters that mix with chemicals that have been released from the central processing unit, leave alone the oil spills, then you can only imagine what will happen to these children. And then we will have high cases of school dropouts. As I mentioned, where we live is where we do our agriculture. So this woman's house looks like this because she has been told you cannot till your land anymore. Her compensation delayed because she refused to sign a document that she does not understand. And she also wants to till her land, so she cannot. So it looks like this. Remember, we're still talking about the impacts of the East African crude oil pipeline, Kingfisher and Tilenga. Health hazards. So this is a case study of one of the projects that Greenfaith is running in the Niger Delta region, which we took as a case study of what will happen should this project continue. So this is the Niger Delta region in a place called Ogoni Community, where Shell decided to drill land and then did not manage. Spillages happened and then Shell took off and left the community with this. These are serious oil spillages. I personally went to this community and these are the things we saw. I keep saying that the shoes I wore this day, I had to throw them away because the smell from those shoes, the oil smell, was too much even after I washed it. But these guys live here. So because of poverty, they will come to the oil spill regions and then they will scoop the oil. This is crude oil, don't forget. They will scoop it because they want to go and resell or they want to go and use it in their houses. This has caused a lot of deaths in one way or the other. Diseases that they pick from this place. And also those who do not know, because predominantly even EACOP and from the Kingfisher and Tilenga oil fields and the pipeline region, these communities are always illiterate. I usually do not know how best not to say illiterate, but they've not gone to school. They don't know any better. And that's why you're seeing them here doing this. And you'll also find somebody smoking while they're scooping the oil. So fires have come out of these situations severally and people have died out of them. And there's nothing you can do about it. So
I'm really sorry, Meryne. I don't want to interrupt you when you're.
Okay. My time is up. All right.
No, you got a couple of more minutes left to wrap up.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So these are, again, remember I said the rivers cannot be accessed anymore. So these are children with their mothers going to, again, a place that is not so nice to go and get water because they cannot access Lake Victoria. They cannot access Lake Albert. So they have to look for water anyway. So they don't go to school, they have to get water from here. Another impact is this is a grandmother with her 2 grandchildren. The son was given the money and he took off. The wife went to look for work and never came back. So the grandmother is left in that house with those 2 grandchildren. We can only imagine what a future those children have. So these are some of the photos after a long discussion we've had. This one we had in Nigeria. And yeah, computer keeps glitching. All right, I will share that later on so that I don't take a lot of time. So we've since had community engagements from Uganda, Tanzania. Just last month, we convened the grassroots people from the affected areas in Uganda and Tanzania, in Kenya here for a meeting, because again, another thing that we found out that these communities had never met each other. They're affected by the same project, but they have never met. So we brought them together for sharing of stories and developing the narrative of the conversation. So I would like to join all of us in this conversation so that we make sure that the banks who are still taking their sweet time in withdrawing from the project can also do the same. We can only stop CNOC and Total if we lean back into our moral values and into our spiritual texts, so that we can say this is immoral and this is not right, because I do not think there's any religion out there that condones such displacement of communities, displacement of families, leaving children in deplorable states, making sure that communities drink from unsafe waters, or even for polluting the environment. Thank you very much, Rosh. I'll give it back to you.
Thanks so much, Meryne. I'm really sorry to interrupt you. I think we all want to learn as much as we can about EACOP, and it's something I've only come to learn about more recently. And I think there's no plainer issue of climate injustice when extractive fossil fuel companies do their operations in places where people are already vulnerable, increasing their vulnerability, only for those companies to profit, and the vulnerable people in the communities where those projects happen not to receive any benefit from it. It happens far too often, and we need to stop these kind of projects from happening for climate and moral justice reasons. We've got a bit of time to ask questions of Meryne, or for us to discuss any of the issues that came up in her talk. So if anyone wants to ask anything, you can pop it in the chat, or please just raise your hand if you would like to ask a question. Did I see you raising your hand there, Phil, or am I mistaken? Okay, sorry. If I could use my facilitator privilege, I know, Meryne, you mentioned some of the actions that faith groups, faith communities are taking in East Africa around EACOP. All of us here in the UK, what is the best way we can be supportive of those communities who are on the front line and are already taking action? As I already mentioned, there are activists who are currently under arrest. How can we show our solidarity and support from here?
Thank you, Rush, for that question. We've got some institutions in UK also that are supporting the same project. And we would be grateful if we continued, putting pressure on them and telling them boldly to stop, citing the social, economic, and environmental impacts that are happening, and also citing the human rights violations that are going on. One thing I know for sure is that the government of Uganda and the government of Tanzania are very much afraid of criticism from overseas. Right? If they see the international community starting to criticize their actions, then they kind of pull back a little bit, as opposed to when we do it here, of course. And also for those who are arrested and intimidated, because we also had somebody who was intimidated by death, I think that's correct English. So when something like that happens, and we always have petitions demanding for the release of these people, we can always share with your networks. So as many signatures as we can gather, and always going on social media and retweeting our posts when we have them would also be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Meryne. Sue, yes, you've got your hand raised.
Thank you very much for that presentation. That was shocking, really. Without very little information beforehand, I'm absolutely shocked by what you've said. And my first kind of feeling was, I remember in the, I guess it was the 80s, when oil was being pumped through Scotland from Aberdeen, and the pipeline came through my family farm. And it was, it was disturbing, and it was sunk underneath. But I've actually just realized the enormity of a pipeline of this nature. Presumably it's an above ground pipeline of vast proportions. And I mean, I can just, the idea of devastating that, these beautiful countries, and also the harm that it will do to animals' migrations, at the very least. So I'm just really in a state of shock, and I want you to thank you for raising that and making us aware of this.
Yes, thank you, Sue. I think Stop EACOP is one of the most important campaigns that climate justice organisers and activists and faith activists can get behind to support. We will be posting more information about how to support the Stop EACOP campaign. We'll be doing a follow-up email with links and important bits of info that have been shared, so you can read about how you would like to get involved. We've got some time now to give you all a chance to talk to each other about what you've heard tonight and discuss how you might like to take action together in an interfaith way, and how you and your faith communities can get involved in the campaigns you've heard about. And I think it's really good when you learn about these campaigns, you have a chance to discuss what action you'd like to take and what action we can take collectively and together. So we're going to give you some time in breakout rooms to get to know each other and think about how you would like to take action together. We've got a few questions to prompt discussion if you need it, and we'd love to hear what you talked about when you return. So we're going to give you just over 10 minutes to do this. So we'll be coming back together here at 20 past, and we'd also love if you could appoint someone to report back at once we've all returned. That would be really great, so we can hear what everyone was discussing. We'll just post the prompts in the chat, and they should be there for when you go into the breakout rooms, and we will see you all very shortly. We're just going to set the rooms up now. If you bear with us one moment.